Imagine this. A young girl, full of ambition and excitement, steps up to board her flight, clutching a first-class ticket. But when she approaches the gate, a flight attendant takes one look at her, dismisses her with a cold glare, and tells her to go to economy, despite the ticket clearly saying otherwise. What unfolds next is a shocking moment of prejudice, a powerful confrontation, and a lesson in respect that will leave you speechless. Where are you watching from? Comment below, like, share, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more incredible stories. At the airport, the terminal bustled with the usual activity of travelers making their way to their respective gates. Among the crowd, a young girl named Amina stood, clutching her first-class boarding pass, her excitement and nervousness mixing as she prepared for her flight. Dressed in a simple but elegant outfit, she was looking forward to the journey, unaware that it would soon take a surprising turn. As Amina approached the gate to board, a flight attendant named Sophia greeted passengers with a practiced, welcoming smile. However, when Amina stepped forward, Sophia's expression subtly shifted. She scanned the young girl's boarding pass, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. Despite it clearly reading, first class, Sophia's dismissive tone made it clear she had already made up her mind about Amina's place on the flight. "Excuse me, young lady," Sophia said, her voice polite but firm, yet there was an undeniable undertone of authority. "First class is reserved for paying passengers. You'll need to head to economy." Amina blinked in surprise, trying to process what had just happened. "I am a first-class passenger," she replied softly, showing her ticket. "Here's my boarding pass." Sophia didn't acknowledge the ticket, instead brushing it off as if it didn't matter. "There must be some mistake. You don't belong here," she said, her words dripping with condescension. She then added, "If you don't comply, I'll have to escalate this and call security." The statement caught Amina off guard, and for a brief moment, she was unsure how to respond. Her mind raced, trying to figure out why she was being treated this way. Was there something wrong with her? Or was it simply the prejudice that Sophia had assumed based on Amina's appearance? The other passengers around them shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but unwilling to intervene. Sophia, oblivious to the fact that Amina's father was the owner of the airline, didn't realize the gravity of her actions. The moment of humiliation would soon spiral into something much bigger. Amina was not your typical young traveler. While many her age might have been nervous about flying, she stood with a quiet confidence that set her apart. At just 17, she had already accomplished what many adults could only dream of, earning a prestigious scholarship that would allow her to study abroad. Today was more than just a flight for her. It was the culmination of years of hard work and dedication. Amina had been away for over 2 years, studying in a distant state far from her family. She had always been an independent young woman, relishing the challenges of living on her own. But today, as she stood in the terminal preparing to board, it was a different feeling that overtook her. This flight marked more than just the end of a long academic journey, it signified her return home. After so long, she would finally be reunited with her family, particularly her father, who she deeply admired. Her father, Malik Thompson, was not just any businessman, he was the owner of the very airline Amina was flying on. Despite his success, Malik had always been humble. He never flaunted his wealth or status, teaching Amina the importance of treating everyone, no matter their role or background, with respect. Whether it was the janitorial staff at his company or the top executives who managed his business, he treated everyone equally. This was a value he instilled in Amina from a young age, emphasizing that respect and kindness were the cornerstones of any successful life. Amina cherished the lessons her father had taught her, and though her father's position in society meant they lived a comfortable life, she preferred to keep their family's wealth private. In fact, very few people knew Malik was her father. She had always been careful to avoid being identified as his daughter, not wanting to be judged or assumed to be someone who had received privileges solely because of her family name. As Amina settled into the exclusive first-class lounge, she couldn't help but glance at her phone, waiting for a message from her father. He had been busy but always made time to check in on her. The message popped up on her screen: "Let me know when you're settled. Can't wait to see you." She smiled softly, feeling a warm sense of anticipation. This flight was not just a return to a place, it was a return to the life, the family, and the values she held dear. However, little did she know, the challenges she was about to face on this plane would test those very values in ways she never expected. As Amina continued to wait in the lounge, she unknowingly became the subject of a conversation between two flight attendants. One of them, Sophia, had been working with the airline for many years. She was a seasoned employee, known for her strict, no-nonsense attitude. But on this particular day, she found herself growing increasingly uncomfortable with the passengers who were boarding the first-class section. Her annoyance was palpable, and her comments about the unfamiliar faces in first class were anything but subtle. "I swear, first class is getting too accessible these days," Sophia muttered to her colleague, a younger attendant named Rachel, who stood nearby. "It's like anyone can buy a ticket up there now." Rachel, slightly taken aback, didn't know how to respond. She was new to the airline and still learning the ropes. While she didn't fully agree with Sophia, she wasn't in a position to challenge her senior colleague. Sophia, on the other hand, continued to make disparaging remarks, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's as if people think they just belong up there, no matter who they are or where they come from," Sophia added, casting a glance across the terminal. Her eyes briefly landed on Amina, but she quickly looked away, not thinking much of the young girl's presence. Sophia's bitterness was rooted in something deeper than just dissatisfaction with the passengers. It was a prejudice that had built up over the years, one that caused her to judge individuals based on appearances and assumptions. The idea that someone like Amina, a young black girl, could be in first class was, in Sophia's mind, simply unthinkable. She didn't consider that Amina had earned her seat through academic achievement or hard work. Instead, she presumed the worst, an unwelcome intrusion into a space she believed was reserved for people of a certain class. As Amina's turn to board came closer, Sophia's prejudices only grew. The moment she saw Amina approach the gate, she felt a wave of frustration wash over her. It was almost as if she couldn't bear the thought of Amina walking past her and sitting in the same space as the more affluent, proper passengers she was used to seeing. Sophia's smirk betrayed her condescending thoughts as she prepared to deal with Amina. This wasn't just about the rules for her, it was about reinforcing her own idea of who belonged where. What she didn't know, however, was that Amina's father was Malik Thompson, the very owner of the airline. Amina's presence in first class was not a mistake, but a rightful seat earned by someone who truly belonged. The moment the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, Amina's heart skipped a beat. She gathered her things, adjusting her carry-on bag, and made her way toward the gate. As she approached, she noticed a few familiar faces, businessmen with expensive suits, a woman in a designer dress, and other well-dressed passengers heading to first class. But none of them caught her attention as much as Sophia, who was stationed at the entrance to the plane. Sophia greeted each first-class passenger with a bright, practiced smile. Her tone was warm and professional as she welcomed an older man in a tailored suit and a couple with designer luggage. Everything seemed normal, but Amina couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside her since she had first encountered Sophia. She felt the tension in the air as she reached the front of the line, prepared to show her boarding pass and move toward her seat. Sophia scanned Amina's pass with a practiced eye. The ticket clearly read first class, but for some reason, Sophia didn't move to direct Amina to her seat. Instead, she paused for a moment, narrowing her eyes, as though unsure of what she was seeing. Amina couldn't quite make sense of the expression on the flight attendant's face. There was no warmth in her smile now, only an icy hesitation. Sophia's eyes flicked briefly to the ticket before she plastered a tight, forced smile on her face and looked Amina over once more. "Oh, I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake," Sophia said, her voice cool and dismissive. "You'll need to head toward the economy section. First class is just down the aisle." Amina blinked in surprise. "This is a first-class ticket," she replied, her voice steady but calm as she held up her boarding pass for Sophia to see. She expected a quick resolution, but Sophia wasn't listening. Sophia's smile didn't falter as she repeated her insistence. "There must be some kind of mistake. Please head to economy," she said, this time with a dismissive edge creeping into her tone. Amina's grip on her carry-on tightened, but she didn't let the frustration show. "This is my seat," she repeated, her voice unwavering. "There is no mistake." Around them, the passengers in the boarding line began to shift uncomfortably. Some looked at Amina with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. The tension at the gate grew thick, but Amina refused to back down. She had a right to be in first class, and she wasn't going to let Sophia's prejudices dictate otherwise. Sophia's tone grew more insistent. "Look, I don't want to cause a scene, but if you don't move to economy, I'll have to call security," she threatened. Amina could feel the sting of humiliation, but she stood her ground, refusing to let the unjust treatment deter her. Amina's heart raced as she tried to process what was happening. She had never imagined that her rightful place in first class would be questioned, especially by someone like Sophia, the flight attendant. It felt as if the entire weight of the situation was bearing down on her, but she refused to let it break her. Sophia, standing firm, continued to insist that Amina's boarding pass was a mistake. "There's been a mix-up," she repeated, this time with more authority in her voice. "You don't belong here. Please, go to the economy section." She gestured dismissively toward the back of the plane, almost as though Amina wasn't even worth speaking to further. Amina blinked in surprise, holding her ground. She looked down at her boarding pass once more, then back at Sophia, who seemed resolute in her decision. There was a flicker of disbelief in Amina's mind, but she quickly squashed it. She couldn't allow this to slide. With a deep breath, she calmly held out her ticket again. "This is my seat," she said quietly but firmly, her voice carrying a calm confidence that surprised even her. Sophia's eyes narrowed as she looked down at the ticket in Amina's hand. Her skepticism was clear, and she wasn't ready to accept that a young black girl like Amina could belong in first class. "I'll need to verify this," she said, her voice clipped. She took the boarding pass from Amina's hand, looking at it as if trying to find some flaw or excuse to send her elsewhere. But there was nothing wrong with it. It was a legitimate first-class ticket. Amina could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her. She could hear the low murmurs of conversation around her, the whispers of judgment and curiosity. Some passengers exchanged looks, confused by the confrontation, while others simply stared at her, their silence loud in the tense atmosphere. Sophia, not wanting to lose control of the situation, leaned in closer. "Are you sure you didn't grab someone else's ticket by mistake?" she asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "This can't be yours." Amina's grip on her carry-on bag tightened. Despite the humiliation rising within her, she refused to let the flight attendant's prejudice dictate how this would unfold. "This is my ticket," she said again, her voice steady, though she felt the sting of Sophia's disregard for her dignity. Sophia glanced over at the passengers behind Amina, who were now visibly growing impatient. Amina could sense the tension building, but still, she stood tall. She wasn't about to back down from what was rightfully hers. As Amina stood her ground, refusing to budge, she noticed the growing discomfort among the other passengers. The murmurs grew louder, and the tension at the gate became almost tangible. Some of the passengers exchanged confused glances, clearly unsure of what was happening. Others eyed Amina with quiet judgment, as if expecting her to simply comply with Sophia's demands. But Amina held firm, her posture unshaken, her resolve clear. Sophia, still unwilling to accept the reality of the situation, took a step closer to Amina. "Please, just head to economy," she repeated, her voice now laced with frustration. "We can't hold up the entire boarding process for this." Amina's grip on her carry-on tightened, but her voice remained calm. "This is my seat," she said again, her words steady, her tone unyielding. "There's no mistake. My father is the one who booked this ticket for me. This is where I belong." Sophia's eyes flicked to Amina's boarding pass again, disbelief evident on her face. She clearly didn't believe Amina's words, but something in the young woman's demeanor made her hesitate. For a brief moment, Sophia looked like she might back down, but then the sharp glint of suspicion returned to her eyes. "I'm going to need to verify this," Sophia said curtly, turning away and walking toward the gate agent. The air between them was thick with tension, but Amina remained calm, resolute in her belief that she had done nothing wrong. As Sophia walked away, Amina stood alone, her cheeks flushed with humiliation. Passengers continued to stare, some with pity, others with quiet judgment. But Amina refused to let the situation get the best of her. She reminded herself of the strength her father had taught her and waited, still confident that the truth would prevail. The flight was already underway when Amina's phone buzzed with a message from her father, Malik. She quickly glanced at it, feeling a wave of relief wash over her as she read his words, "Stay where you are. I'm making the call now." Amina's heart settled a little, knowing that her father was on top of the situation. He was always just a step ahead when it came to handling any crisis, big or small. In the meantime, Sophia continued to move around the cabin, but her demeanor had shifted. Amina could feel the difference in the air. It wasn't just that Sophia was now ignoring her, she was avoiding her. Every time Sophia walked past, she would make sure to stay as far from Amina's row as possible. The coldness was palpable, but Amina refused to let it rattle her. Several minutes passed before the flight attendant finally approached Amina's seat. Sophia's movements were slower now, reluctant even. When she reached Amina's row, she hesitated, trying to muster some kind of professionalism, but her discomfort was evident. She stood there awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with Amina, who remained calm and collected. Then, suddenly, there was a tap on the shoulder of the head flight attendant, and the captain of the flight appeared, his expression serious but composed. Without any words of greeting, he simply spoke in a low voice, "I've been instructed to inform you that the situation will be addressed when we land. You are to treat this passenger with the utmost respect and care for the rest of the flight." Sophia froze. Her face drained of color as the reality of the situation hit her. Malik Thompson, Amina's father, was not just a businessman, he was the owner of the airline, and his daughter was being treated unfairly. The tension that had hung over the flight attendant seemed to suffocate her now. When the plane landed, the atmosphere in the cabin shifted dramatically. The murmurs from passengers had grown louder as they had watched the interactions between Amina and Sophia, sensing something was amiss but unsure of the full story. Amina, still seated in first class, now waited with a quiet, steady determination, knowing her father, Malik, would handle the situation. As the last passengers disembarked, Amina felt a subtle shift in the cabin, a heaviness in the air as Sophia stood, looking visibly distressed. Amina remained seated, her eyes calm, but inside, she felt a small sense of satisfaction. This moment, she knew, would come to define the consequences for the way she had been treated. Sophia, still trying to maintain composure, didn't expect what was coming next. Malik Thompson, the airline's owner, stepped onto the plane, accompanied by two senior executives. His presence was commanding, and the room seemed to still as all eyes turned toward him. It wasn't just his stature or authority, it was the knowledge that he had come to address the injustice that had unfolded. Sophia's heart sank as she recognized him. The realization hit her like a wave. Amina was not just any passenger. She was Malik Thompson's daughter. "Miss Harper," Malik began, his voice steady and measured, "I understand there was an issue with my daughter's seat." Sophia's face drained of color. She stammered, trying to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I didn't know she was your daughter, sir," she muttered, the fear creeping into her voice. Malik remained unmoved. "That's irrelevant," he said firmly. "What matters is how you treated her. Effective immediately, you are to be removed from duty." The passengers around them began to whisper. Some exchanged knowing glances, while others shook their heads in disbelief. Amina, sitting calmly in her seat, couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. Sophia's public humiliation had come at the cost of her own prejudice and ignorance. The entire cabin now saw the truth, and the lesson was clear: respect and dignity had to be extended to everyone, no matter who they were. In the days that followed the flight, Sophia couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of shame that lingered over her. The realization that she had been so quick to judge Amina, and worse, to humiliate her publicly, weighed heavily on her conscience. Her actions had not only damaged her professional reputation but had also exposed her deep-seated prejudice. She couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind, wondering how she had let her biases cloud her judgment. Sophia's guilt intensified when she received a formal notice from the airline. Malik Thompson had ensured that the incident was reviewed thoroughly. Her behavior had become a reflection of the airline's values, and it was clear that something had to change, not just for her but for the entire staff. As part of her consequence, she was suspended and required to undergo sensitivity and anti-bias training. One evening, feeling the full weight of her actions, Sophia sat down at her kitchen table and opened her laptop. She knew that writing an email to Amina and the airline was a necessary step in owning up to her mistakes. The words came slowly at first, but as she typed, she found herself pouring out a heartfelt apology. She wrote not only about her regret for mistreating Amina but also about her realization of how her biases had shaped her decisions. Sophia's apology acknowledged that she had failed as a representative of the airline and as a human being. She admitted that she had allowed assumptions to control her actions and promised to do better, both personally and professionally. The letter was long, filled with remorse and self-reflection. When she hit send, Sophia knew that while the apology would never erase the hurt she had caused, it was a step toward making things right. It was the beginning of a long journey toward change, a journey that had begun with a lesson she would never forget. Weeks after the incident, Amina found herself once again seated in the first-class cabin of the same airline. This time, however, the atmosphere on board felt different, calmer, more respectful. Amina was seated next to her father, Malik, as they traveled together to another business meeting, and she couldn't help but notice the positive shift among the flight attendants. Gone was the awkwardness and dismissiveness that had marred her previous flight. Instead, the staff was attentive, professional, and genuinely kind. Amina glanced around the cabin and noticed how much the behavior of the crew had improved. They moved with purpose and efficiency, their smiles genuine as they greeted passengers, and no one seemed out of place in first class anymore. It was clear that the lesson from the earlier incident had been taken seriously. Malik's influence had ensured that the staff was trained, and the change was palpable. One of the flight attendants, a woman who had been on the flight when Amina was humiliated, approached their row. She smiled warmly at Amina, offering her a selection of drinks. Amina noticed the difference in her demeanor. There was no hesitation or judgment in the way she interacted with her now. It was as though the experience had shaped the way she saw passengers, and she now treated everyone with an added sense of respect. Amina, though still quietly reflective about what had happened, felt a sense of gratitude for her father's unwavering support. Malik had ensured the situation was addressed, but more importantly, he had used the incident to instill lasting change in the airline's culture. As the flight continued smoothly, Amina couldn't help but think about how much growth had occurred, not only for herself but for the people around her. The experience had strengthened her resolve, and she was more determined than ever to stand up for what was right, just as her father had taught her. In life, it's easy to assume someone doesn't belong based on their appearance, background, or preconceived notions. Yet, as Amina's experience at the airport shows, true worth and respect aren't defined by what others expect but by the values we hold within ourselves. Amina, despite being unjustly targeted by a flight attendant's prejudice, remained steadfast and calm, knowing her worth wasn't tied to superficial judgments. Her father, Malik, taught her to treat everyone with kindness and dignity, and that respect must be given to everyone, no matter their position or background. The lesson here is that dignity, respect, and self-worth come from within, not from how others perceive us. Sometimes, standing firm against unfair treatment requires quiet strength, but it always leads to growth, both personally and for those around us. The change we seek in the world often begins with one person, one act of kindness or courage. So, the next time you face adversity or judgment, remember Amina's resilience and her father's wisdom. Be true to your values and don't let others' assumptions dictate your path. It's a reminder that fairness and respect should be extended to all, regardless of appearance or status. If you believe in justice, kindness, and standing up for what's right, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell to stay updated. Your support helps spread important messages to those who need it most.